Hi, everyone. It's so great to have you with us today. For those who don't know me yet, my name is Amanda Ferber. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Architecture Hunter. And I'm really happy to welcome you to another one of our monthly webinars. This series is something we started earlier this year as a way to dive deeper into one of Architecture Hunter main pillars, education. And the goal is to create meaningful moments of learning, exchange, and inspiration. Moments that connect our global community around architecture, design, and everything in between. Each month, we explore a new theme, and for May, the spotlight is on tech shaping architecture. And we are looking, we're looking at how innovation, digital tools, and new technologies are influencing the way we design, build, and even experience architecture. So I'm really excited about today's conversation and especially about the amazing guests we have joined us. And with this being our theme of the month, we are also really proud to share that both of our main sessions are supported by Morfolio, a company we have had the pleasure of collaborating with for so many years now. Morfolio is a network of applications created by architects for architects. And we partner with them because both of us are always seeking ways to advance this discourse on architecture. It's honestly impressive how all of their tools are in constant evolution, always introducing smart, thoughtful features that truly support and enhance the way architects work today. And if you're an architect and not using Morfolio trace, you're truly missing out. We are incredibly grateful for Morfolio's continued support, not only for this month, but throughout all these years. And I really want to take a moment to personally thank Anna, Jeff, and Joey. So thank you guys so much for being such amazing partners. Now let's talk about today's guests. When we at Architecture Hunter teamed up with Morfolio's team to co-curate this month's speakers, it was such a great process. And honestly, some names just came up really naturally. First, we'll have a talk by Sean Gallagher, Principal and Director of Sustainable Design at Diller Scofidio Renfro. Sean is also a faculty member at Columbia University's GSAPP, and he's been focused on environmental architecture and sustainable design for the past 25 years. At Diller Scofidio Renfro, he's deeply involved in every project and plays a key role in shaping the studio's new work through a sustainable lens, something we're really looking forward to hearing more about. And right after that, we'll be joined by our dear friend Michel Rojkind, founder of Rojkind Arquitectos. Michel, born in Mexico City, is known for his bold, context-driven approach to design. He's taught at Harvard, UPenn, SC and IIT, and has served as a juror in major international competitions and was recently named a honorary fellow at the AIA. He's actually already been to Brazil for an event we created in Architecture Hunter, and I remember how much he shared about technology in architecture. It's something that feels very natural to him, and that's exactly why having him here today felt like such an obvious and exciting choice. So before we dive into the talks, let me give you a quick overview on how today's session is going to work. Each of our guests will kick things off by sharing a bit about their work, their approach, and what they have been exploring lately. And after each presentations, we'll move into a live Q&A session moderated by our very own Daniela Silva. If you have ever seen our video articles in our website before, chances that you have already come across with her writing. Daniela is the voice behind many of our texts on our website, and she'll be joining. She'll be helping guide the conversation today. So if any questions come to mind during the talks, feel free to drop them in the chat at any point or save them for the end, whatever works best for you. And before we get started, just a quick reminder, entries for the Architecture Hunter Awards 2025 are officially open. We are now in the main entry phase, so if you haven't submitted your project yet, now's a great time. And you still have until July 9 to join us and be part of this global celebration of architecture. Now let's officially get started. It's a true honor to welcome our first guest of the day, Gallagher from Diller Scofidio Renfro. And before anything else, on behalf of the entire team at Architecture Hunter and Morfolio, I want to offer a huge congratulations to Sean and the entire Diller Scofidio Renfro team. They have just received the Golden Lion at the Venice Biennale, which is the highest honor you can get there. It's such an incredible and well-deserved achievement. I wasn't able to attend the opening, but I'll be heading to Venice in 2 weeks, and I can't wait to see it all in person. So, Sean, congratulations once again, and welcome. We are so happy to have you with us today.
Hey, it's very great to be here, talking with you, and talking about, our workflow and, moving things forward and designing as always. I just want to say, I appreciate you guys putting this together and basically taking a look at some time for sharing, what we're kind of tinkering with. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Perfect. Can you see me?
Yes. Also, we can see you and the screen.
Yeah. All right. All right. Great, great, great. So, I mean, just so everyone kind of knows a little bit, at DSR, we sort of like to experiment. We think about things big and small. We're not, kind of architects really. We work in that realm, but we also work in different realms as well. So we do things from like making glassware like this Spice Virtue, where we sort of hack the glassware in order to kind of have contradictory kind of passions, and some obsessions that are both healthy and not healthy at the same time, and kind of thinking about that. But we also do master planning like South Sea Pearl. It's an ecological island that is serving as a breakwater system for the long-term resiliency of the city of Hainan. But I think, at any scale, we are often rethinking or maybe repurposing existing technologies. And like at the shed here, we repurpose gantry technology to have a building be able to deploy its exterior shell, grow the institution when it needed the growth for the art that was happening, and then basically nest itself back into the main building during the seasons that are really cold and really like winter, and really warm like summer, where you need that kind of extra thermal barrier for the building operations. And we do that. We think about also emerging real-time, technology, not just appropriating old technology. So thinking about weather monitoring systems, which are becoming so and so, more important these days as the weather changes quite drastically, to create a building envelope out of water, like Blur. And it's really trying to create a new experience of the lake, but it was also about experiencing water in a different way. And then while people were experiencing this behind the scenes, it was sort of filtering the lake water and returning it back to the environment cleaner than the water was before. So really kind of trying to connect to the place a little bit differently. And to do this, I mean, this is Liz and Rick, playing with beta software, trying to keep a cloud of mist stable around the experience, to be the exterior shell in 2002. Real-time weather monitoring systems, with building operation systems was just kind of emerging. And the idea was that perhaps if we can create the pressure in the nozzles to be either less or more, we could actually adapt to the winds that were changing on the lake in real time. And I think I believe that, strongly that, in order to have technology shape your work, you sort of have to play with it yourself. I feel we become really kind of dependent on consultants as architects, and we don't really get our hands dirty as much as we should, or as much as we would like to do, because it's just fun. So even with our own process, this is Rick and I. About 15 years ago, I became obsessed with being able to draw anywhere, not just at my desk, or not just in my little notepad, at any scale. So this was me testing about 15 years ago, testing emerging softwares like Morpholio's Trace. This was, the first first software I began to use and really kind of push the envelope with. So I could do anything anywhere at any scale. Because in the end, I think sketching is how we figure out problems. And for me, it doesn't matter what type of BIM technology we have, what type of the AIA is pushing so much money into all these other coordination things. We really should be pushing money into the art, into tracing and drawing and kind of figuring out problems. Within 2 years, I moved my workflow all the way over, and I don't have anything, any computer at my desk any longer. And so that's what I kind of want to talk to you guys about today, or at least a little bit. I've never done this before. This is kind of sharing some personal stuff, because it's really about tinkering, how we kind of do things behind the scenes, or how I kind of obsess with things behind the scenes that eventually make their way into projects. So whether it's repurposing existing technologies for energy, carbon, and waste, or talking about emerging technologies, all this stuff has to be done at a smaller scale to really understand how it can influence things at a bigger scale. So bear with me. This is kind of just a talk that's rough and kind of spontaneous. Energy itself and tinkering with energy. This is Port Jervis. It's the last port up the Delaware River in New York, just on the south side of the Catskills. And like any kind of Rust Belt city, it's sort of lost its industry. The glassmaking industry was there, kind of moved on, and there's a lot of material, that needs to be repurposed or unused. The ports aren't moving any longer, but obviously they have a lot of that material still left. And so I personally thought maybe this would be an opportunity. It was pretty close for me to drive. Maybe this would be an opportunity for me to personally just try to go completely off grid, in a way, using old industrial materials to build something that basically it's more or less 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bath, that I could tinker with to really kind of understand how this technology is growing. And this is not, like I said, this is behind the scenes. This is not particularly a DSR project. This is kind of me personally testing the technologies. This is, me, my family, couple friends, kind of, welding things together, reusing old angle irons found at the ports, to kind of build this place to see if we can make it happen, and really learn from it. What I found was that the solar panels I was using, I wanted to use bifacial solar panels. I really want to kind of test out that technology. And what I found was that it produces energies on both sides, which is really great. So I sort of lifted it off the containers. But what I found is that they're much heavier than regular solar panels because they have glass on both sides. And it was really hard to kind of move around and place on top of the structures. And the interesting thing was that in wiring all the panels and running all the wires underneath these solar panels, you can see it's a mess. It took me some time, and it's cleaner now. But what was kind of unbelievable was that the temperature difference between me lifting these panels up off the roof, 2 feet, I could slide under them and kind of work with the wiring. The temperature difference was like night and day. It was like 10 degrees different. As soon as I kind of walked out from underneath that space wiring and kind of stood up into the sun, it was kind of, it was unexpected. I knew it was going to be different, but I didn't know it was going to be that different. Eventually, I was able to kind of, get everything working. It took some time. And like I said, these are raw videos of me just trying to figure these things out. And so I loaded the software onto the inverters there, and they're a 14 kW array system with about a 30 kW backup system that I'm running there. And what I was kind of impressed about was that in the end, just with that 14 kW, I was able to support everything in this project. And the coolest thing actually was that after a while this thing was running, I was actually doing welding off of the sun's energy, which was just weird, but kind of cool at the same time. The other thing is that, you kind of have to control these things and know how to control these things so you can talk to your clients about this. And so I started actually taking a look at the beta software that the company EG4 was trying to kind of hack together for regular, hobbyists to kind of figure out how to use and kind of run their own systems. And what you're seeing here is my place running, and you're seeing not a lot of energy, right? You're seeing only about 345 watts. And that's because the array system itself was able to support, all the kind of plug loads, all the kind of refrigerators, all the things that we were kind of doing, and overnight, and sort of charge itself back up by 10 o'clock. And that's what you're kind of seeing right here, is that by 10 o'clock, it's kind of fully charged. And then it obviously ramps itself down, and only uses the energy you need for the plug loads or whatever you're doing. The biggest thing that I found was that the heating and cooling water, we take it for granted. It's happening at power plants. It's happening everywhere. There's a lot of energy going into heating, cooling, and water. This blip here is basically the hot water tank going back on to reheat the water back up to temperature after it was sitting for, you can see, like 6 or 7 hours. And so none of the other loads in the project are actually anywhere near that. And it's these blips that are kind of interesting. But going back to the canopies, and thinking about this interstitial space in the canopies, I started to think about the way that this could be used, and we started experimenting it on a kind of larger scale in Moscow. So we took this concept to Moscow and kind of along a demoed site along the river in Moscow. And what we wonder is if we can create, one thing, the big master planning effort was to create a wild urbanism. So taking regional landscapes from around Moscow, bringing them into the urban center in order to basically integrate them with a series. It's about a campus of 5 buildings. But we thought that perhaps we can kind of create a space where this could be passively run. This campus can be passively run. The outdoor spaces, the exterior spaces, off of the sun. So it was a park, but it was also a campus of buildings. And we kind of created this glass crust, which you see on the right here, over top of one of the hills that we created there, that we had an amphitheater underneath. And we thought that in that interstitial space, not only could we kind of harness energy, but we could also kind of change the temperature so that seasonally people could stay outdoors longer. It gets really cold in Moscow really quickly. And so what you're seeing here down at bottom corner is kind of this glass crust, we called it, that sort of overlaid over top of a landscape and was kind of generating energy, but also allowing light through to kind of change the kind of temperature between that and the amphitheater. And so what happened was, and you can see kind of the thermal modeling for this, what happened was that one, obviously it reduces all the loads of the building below it, but at the same time, it was creating open space that would normally not be used during the winter. And we thought that this way of kind of manipulating the sun and layering with a certain amount of distance away from Earth, we would be able to have a little bit of spring in winter. And so what you're looking at here is in winter, you can see Moscow in the distance, and there's snow. This is not enclosed. This is not a greenhouse. It's completely open. You saw the kind of airflow diagrams. But just in that ability to manipulate light for growth, but also for energy to keep the ground a little bit warm, we're taking the waste energy and putting it into the ground as well, to keep the kind of environment healthier longer throughout the year. And so, talking about, keeping the environment healthier, moving on to another topic where I'm sort of experimenting with is, just carbon, right? Attacking carbon is a kind of a big kind of part of how we have to start to build healthier. And back in Port Jervis, the growth that's around Port Jervis, around the kind of containers I'm playing with, is its second stage of growth. This whole area was sort of harvested at the end of the 18th century for tanning oils and also for wood to build things, and specifically building ships too. And so there's old logging roads still in this area, and this is one of the logging roads. But in order to kind of get back there and kind of play with what I'm playing with, we did have to take down some trees. Fortunately, a mile and a half down the road, one of the neighbors had a portable mill. And I said, well, this is an opportunity for me to learn how to use wood and, in a kind of in a different way. So started to mill the wood, started to learn how to use a mill itself, just kind of weekend warrioring this whole thing together. And what I found was interesting, When I started trying drying the wood naturally, you got to realize that the forest itself was completely deciduous, and so it had some evergreens and it had some deciduous, and it was kind of a mix. So I had a lot of different type of wood types. And one of the things that I found is when we started drying them, we cut them and milled them pretty straight. And I was really interested on how the different species would actually move as it dried, how much it would shrink, how much it would bend to kind of keep straight. Because in the end, I wanted to kind of use it to kind of panel the interior wall. So when you look out through the glass, you kind of see a representation of the mixture that's part of the forest on the inside. And, soft wood gets a bad rap. But what I found in doing this is that, the birch, which was going to be really beautiful, and I was really happy about the birch being part of the material palette. It's a hardwood, and it's really heavy actually. And I was like, oh, this is going to be terrific. In the end, even though that it's a hardwood and really heavy, it worked a lot more than the pine did. And it was a lot harder to control, and it was more brittle. It would break a little bit easier. The pine stayed so straight through the drying. We dried it for about 10 months naturally. And so one of the things that it helped me with is with a project that I'm working with on right now in Boston. I'm building a mass timber tower. It'll be the first mass timber tower in a major city like Boston or Chicago or New York that's burned down and has pretty extreme fire departments there. But what was interesting about it was that, this site itself, I'm just going to fly through this, was an existing parking lot. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was actually keep that parking lot as open space instead of building the building on there. And we sort of squeezed into the corner of the site that wasn't originally really given to us, but we saw as an opportunity to kind of reduce the overall footprint and add an acre of open space back to BU's campus. They don't really have a central green, and we're trying to kind of create a central green with them. But what this did is push all the program high and skinny. We have a very small floor plate here. It's only like 6,000 square feet. But what's interesting is that at the height of about 12 stories or 180 feet, it's now you can go that high with timber structures. So it's actually as of right. And in 2024, you'll be able to go a little bit higher. And what's interesting about that, though, is that there are some caveats to the addendums to the code that allow you to do this. And one of them is that only 19% of the program, only 20% of the wood can be exposed. I actually have to cover up with chip wallboard the other 80% of the timber structure, even though the timber structure is fireproof and it's self-healing and will burn for 4 inches deep and stay way past what steel would stay past with its kind of fire coating on it. So what we did was we took 19% of the program was actually social spaces and collaborative spaces, and we sort of stripped the chip wallboard from the structure, the all timber structure in those areas, and kind of revealing it and going through the kind of this strenuous process of trying to figure out how to do that, because now it's a code calculation that we're actually going to have to do, or we're doing right now to make that happen. But the interesting thing was we were kind of going through and thinking about different woods that we would be able to kind of source locally and even in America to do this. So we're working with 3 or 4 different suppliers who are bidding on it. We're going to go into ground next year on this or earlier than that. And so we're going through the bid process now. And what I became more comfortable with is that in Arkansas, we have more softwoods that are local, and in the lower regions of Canada, which is really close up, we have more softwoods. So I became a little bit more comfortable with using fir for the mass timber structures, because I had this kind of experience of like, wow, it is actually truer, straighter. We talk about it as being bad for floors, but being great for structures. This is something that I think people are starting to become more aware of. I mean, in the end, we didn't have a basement, so we did a steel building version of this with the mass timber, both having low carbon concrete, just taking a look at the structure itself. And by doing this, going structure, I don't think there's another mass timber tower in the United States. We're already down to the ground. We're not doing, 10 stories of concrete and then putting wood on top of that. We're reducing about 87% of the carbon that's associated with building a similar steel building in the same structure itself. And I think this idea of reason why it was a box and reason why it was very kind of simple, the monolith, is that we wanted also to reduce the amount of waste and reduce the amount of material needed to enclose a space. And so I think the last thing is really waste. Waste is kind of a big thing that we need to sort of take a look at.
Oh my God,
and this is real. This is my house.
Sewage, raw sewage in my own shoes.
That's my wife.
Medically, raw sewage.
Natalie.
What is that linked to? I don't know. Like, oh my God. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Are you making waves?
I'm trying, Sean.
So this was not Sandy. This was not a hurricane coming through New York City. This was a tropical depression that caught us by surprise. And what happened was we didn't flood from the storm surge. Where we flooded was from the sewer system. The rain became so intense so quick that the water blew through my backflow preventers and came through my toilet. And this is my daughter's room. So the irony of this whole thing is that my brother works with wastewater treatment systems. At Battery Park City, basically, they recycle all their water, their black water, and they use it for the last 20 years. This is nothing new. Last 20 years, for all their water that's required in the towers, they put two towers together, and they actually kind of recirculate that water. And so they use it for everything but potable water. But potable water is only 3% of the water that's being used in all these systems within the buildings we're creating, specifically the urban buildings that we're creating. So we took this idea and at DSR and with my brother, and we went to Venice. And in Venice, we said, Liz had this kind of crazy idea. She said, you know, what if we could make espresso out of the canal? Because it's about perception. You know, the canal's dirty, we can't use it. We have to pipe in water like the Romans did from very, very far away in order to use it locally. But the trick here was if we were going to create espresso, it had to have minerals. It had to have things of the water. It couldn't just be reverse osmosis like we're doing in other parts of the world, because that water could be from everywhere. It doesn't have any of the minerals that would make a really good, really place-specific espresso. And so we kind of worked through the kind of mechanical systems of actually doing two streams. One stream that's natural, going through a biofiltration process. One stream that's going through membranes, as you saw there, that Zach was showing you, that reduce the amount of salt in the water. Because one of the things that the natural systems can't do is reduce the amount of salt, because salt is dissolved really kind of low, but it can reduce everything else, or it can actually work and kind of filter everything else. And then we take those two streams and we put it together into a blend tank. And then in that blend tank, we bring to the espresso machine, the perfect blend, and then make espresso from it. And what's interesting about it was that we wanted to make it didactic, because it is about perception. We wanted people to be able to see this thing working really in its raw form, to get an understanding that we can actually keep water local. You know, it can influence how we build parks within cities. It can influence how we actually you know, use the water that we thought was waste as something, as a resource, because only humans really think of, it's a human word, waste. Like everything else is decomposing in the forest, that would be considered waste, but it's actually nutrients that can be reused. We also did a lot of kind of tinkering with being able to reuse the steel, not welding the steel, but actually clamping the steel together so that it could be reused for different restoration elements around Venice, or be moved to other locations around the world itself. This is me and my brother watching the canal water go in for the first time. He's a little stressed.
For the first time. We'll
How to
see.
make this work.
The good thing is that the water looks dirty.
In the end, this just happened last week. We kind of opened it, and you know, there was a lot of questions in the crowd, like, wow, you can actually, is this real? You know, can you drink the local water? And the truth is, it's not new technology. We can drink water that's closer to us. the same time, we're kind of messing with this kind of beta software to monitor it in real time. One of the things that's, was the most difficult is that this is the first time this was done, is actually getting it through the authorities, having the authorities actually, the health and authorities within the city, the safety authorities within the city. And so what we could demonstrate to them is that we can actually monitor this in real time, and know exactly the kind of turbidity of the water. So we know that it's safe and they can monitor it themselves remotely if they needed to monitor it. In the end, I think, we heard that it won the Golden Lion in the introduction.
The future of
but
Venice
just
is very
to see it
interlinked
working.
with the future of water. And so in this case, it was an incredible team putting together design, architecture, putting together engineering, putting together in construction, one of the world's leaders in looking at construction and water. And in order to do something which is about how can we purify in a natural way water from the lagoon.
So pretty close by in Milan, Milan has the opposite problem. Milan doesn't have enough water. And so they're starting to take their wastewater treatment plants and trying to figure out a way to transform them so that they could use it for some of their reuse the wastewater for some of the industrial uses around the city, so the residents have clean, potable water. And so the question for us was, could we take, the existing fabric, the existing urban fabric, and find a way to actually reuse water, and create a place where people can kind of see it, experience it, but also kind of pull the kind of what we call an ensemble of buildings off of this central system, and recirculate its own water. In order to do this, we needed to do one thing that was really important. These commercial activities that we do in cities, they're only during the day. You need the loads of water and waste streams and power and heat happening at the night as well. So the ensemble was adding a new residential tower with the office tower and using the bridge, adaptively using the bridge to be this connection between the two of them, where the wastewater and the waste heat came down to the bridge, and the bridge itself, very much like the root systems of trees, would then take the nutrients out and then put the water back up into the towers for people to use again. We called it the living bridge. And basically what it did was it, collected, treated, reused the storm and gray black water system. So this is just blowing up the little experiment that we showed in Venice into a way to really adaptively change the urban fabric in a way that influences large scale development itself. So it starts with a screening tank going into the aquatic cells and the membranes, and then becoming 30,000 gallons of clean water a day for the towers to reuse, trying to target an overall net zero water demand. But what's great about this is that the greenhouse itself becomes a public space, but it's actually the mechanical room, if you really think about it. The aquatic cells become a place that people can explore, touch, feel, escape to in a semi-conditioned space between two buildings, very much like Z Park was itself. And the membranes itself, would be able to be within here after the water was treated naturally to finally, filter it to potable quality and become perhaps the platforms that people are walking on for the Fashion Institute or whatever exhibitions happening within this public space adjacent to the greenhouse area or the living bridge area. And we know that we can actually start to just, show this. We're doing it on our phones all the time now in real time to people, so they kind of understand that we need to rethink the way we use waste. We need to rethink that we had to build parks and then take care of them. This park would be taking care of itself. Our waste would be taking care of the park. We wouldn't be importing water from distances, importing nutrients from distances to maintain the park itself. And I think that's, that's kind of things that I'm behind the scenes, and we are behind the scenes at DSR tinkering with. But I really feel that it's two things. It's about perception. And I think it's also about really doing the experimentation yourself, and testing yourself. Otherwise, I think it's really hard for tech to shape your work if you're just sort of learning about it, but not playing with it physically. And so that's the only thing I would say to everybody is that if you have the opportunity, the experiments could be so small, but just those small experiments on your own time makes a huge difference on understanding what you can do later on. I think that was about 30 minutes. You'll have to tell me. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes, yes, we're hearing you. Okay. Thank you, Shen, so much for the presentation. We are now inviting Daniela. She's going to do the Q&A session with you.
Terrific. Hi, Daniela.
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much for this presentation. Was a bit, it was very inspiring, and it was a bit surprising for me to see certain things that you shared. So thank you for that. It's
Yeah, it wasn't
really nice
polished.
to see. No, it's
It
not
was
in
raw
that
behind the
sense.
scenes.
It was in the sense that it was very honest. You know what I mean? Like it was not like
Yeah.
thinking from a commercial perspective or like very, it was very honest and almost like a conversation more than a formal presentation. Thank you so much. It was very inspiring. Well, I will start congratulating you for the award, of course, on Venice, the Golden Lion. And to start this conversation, maybe we can start with that project, because the Canal Café, it's a remarkable project. It was for me surprising to read about it, a bit out of the box, which is always refreshing. And it's part an espresso bar, part a laboratory.
Yeah.
And it not only addresses water purification, but also reimagines Venice as a living laboratory for future urban life, and that it's very interesting, this combination. So could you share how this project reflects the studio's evolving relationship with sustainability and technology and public space?
Yeah. I mean, I think, zooming way out, we don't really talk about sustainability as the primary interesting thing. I think the interesting thing is how people connect with what you're doing that brings them closer to their environment. It's about that tangible moment. It's about that unexpected moment that I think really changes the way people think, and eventually will start to change the way our culture acts and gets more comfortable with things that, 100 years ago were dangerous, but they're no longer dangerous any longer. Emergent technology is very different than the turn of the century technology in the 1800s, right? And so we've separated these areas between what can be industrial, what can be residential within our urban planning on purpose, because it was dangerous. We had to move it from the city, right? When we had cracking barrels for breaking down crude inside the cities and they exploded, that was a problem. And I think now, people only understand that history, and they don't understand when we're talking about, bringing these kind of resources that are inside the cities, these new industries that are inside the cities, they're different, and they actually can make us healthier if we just keep these resources more locally. But in order to do that, you need to connect culturally somehow, right? So with the, cafe, right, having an espresso in Italy is very Italian. Right. So, right. And so people are going to be like, oh, if we talked about it academically, and just said we can do this, and it was kind of a tech show thing, then people were like, oh, that's cool. But actually tasting the coffee, it brings them closer. It makes them interested in like, maybe I'll learn a little bit about this technology, but I don't know. But without that, it wouldn't really kind of bring it closer. And as far as the history of the practice, what, you know, Liz and Rick and Charles, you know, they come from, you know, they're trained as architects, but they come from art and understanding culture. And specifically with our public spaces, are, you know, trying to make things more visible to the public within the urban fabric instead of walled off. All those things are like revealing things to people to make them more social, more public. And I think, you know, going back to, like I said, 2002 was when Blur was, you know, thinking about using, you know, inhaling water, right, as a way of new experience, right? So I think these curiosities continue, but I think, like you saw, you know, it's playing at a smaller scale. Like Rick was, you know, Rick was into cars and making cars and stuff like that. He was tinkering with like, how does this actually work with the spray nozzle and the pressure of the nozzle? And if you don't really have that kind of tangible interest, it's sort of hard to push the technology in a new direction itself. You sort of have to play with it. But yeah, I think it's a part of a long, and there's other instances, you know, throughout other projects we could talk about. I knew we only had, you know, 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes. So I just kind of picked these three.
Thank you. And well, when you talk about technology and sustainability, these are two topics that often are discussed together, but they can sometimes feel at odds in practical terms. And my next question would be, how do you navigate this balance in your work? And what does it mean to embed sustainability strategically into architectural projects?
I think the conflict is interesting. Personally, and I know even, you know, it's just that tension is where the magic is. I mean, the kind of vice virtue glassware, right? It's this idea of water's healthy for you, but you want a little bit more in it, right? To relax yourself, right? And it's like this conflict between two things that usually produces new grounds, new territory to explore. And so I think, you know, the idea that technology can solve everything it's not true, right? It's that conflict from the idea that when you talk about sustainable practices, a lot of it's about being passive, right? And those are two different things. But I think if we can pull together the passive with, I'm actually really excited about this next century because it's the, you know, it's the biotech century. So you're taking the natural and the tech and you kind of putting them together. And I think if we can get a metabolism flowing within our cities, sort of like life has a metabolism, instead of just extracting things from afar, consuming them and dumping them, but we have this city that's kind of recirculating its own resources, and like our body kind of circulates our own blood and oxygen and reuses it, brings in small bits that's needed to replenish it, but also exhales and helps out the trees. Like if we can kind of get that going in cities, that mentality change, I think I just think that's the exciting itch that I want to continue to explore the next, you know, however long I have.
Okay, that brings me to another question. That is, we've been seeing a broader shift in the industry of architecture, from using technology as a support mechanism to placing it at the core of the design process, right?
Yeah.
And how has this shift, or how do you see that this shift is influencing the way architects work?
Generally, I mean, generally it's good. Broadly, it's good. I think, you know, in the 1960s, there was that underlying, you know, interest among designers to be more passive, think about the environment in designing everything. And I think in order just to design, you should be thinking about all this stuff anyways, like the environment that you're placing this object in or placing this place or housing structure or something in, is affected by the environment. The environment is and it's affecting the environment. So, you know, like designing anything that's kind of, you know, seamless and works with other stuff, we should be seamless and working with the place that it's in. So I think under everything, it should just be there. I think what's more interesting is that we find the cultural connections that might be influenced by the habits that make us a little bit more sustainable. And we got to bring those cultural activities to the forefront. And so for me, doing it just to say I can make the most efficient building, we're going to become more efficient over time. It's just the way that the human, you know, we once we start doing something, we kind of really run it to the ground, almost in a bad way sometimes, but we're going to become more efficient. How can you make that more efficiency? Help our culture, help somebody locally, I think is the real question for me. Influence the way people think. Because if it's all behind the scenes and you don't see it, like as my brother's, you know, Battery Park City, you know, and those were my students from Columbia going down in there. No one knows it exists. It's in the basement, it's hidden. I think we need to take these things and make them more visible. And I think so the idea of sustainability being the forefront or saying at the focus in the center is great, but now we need to actually make sure that it doesn't overshadow the way that we can open up and make things more public. Because it's not all about just making things efficient, because the human body's not even that efficient. We can get like 80% efficient and people enjoy it. That's how things are going to move forward. If no one sees it, they're not going to push for it any longer.
Yeah, that's true. It's an interesting perspective. I have another quick question, and then we could jump into the questions from the audience.
Okay.
Is there any emerging technology that you believe will most significantly influence architectural practice or sustainability in the next decade?
I'm not sure there's one. I think it's more the category of experimentation. I'm truly interested in the biotech combination of the century, like thinking about natural systems as partners with the human systems that we've created. And we need people experimenting to find those new relationships, right? Biotech right now is seen as, you know, we can actually 3D print metals to be able to place into people's elbows, make people live longer, right? It's like this combination of the natural and the machine. But I think that's mostly happening on the kind of medical side. And I think it needs to be happening more on the urban fabric, the place, the community side. And I think once that starts happening, that's what I see is going to really change the way, you know, the way that our cities operate and tackle the kind of bigger challenge of not overheating ourselves like that we're doing right now.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple of questions from our audience. The first one I would read is from Joey. Love seeing your tinkering approach to design. There's so much freedom and fun in that, and they deleted. Okay, interesting. Here.
Oh, I'm glad.
No, it's here.
Share.
It's here. It's moved somewhere else. There's so much fun and freedom in that process. Your drawings also demonstrate a similar mentality. How does sketching and drawing by hand fit into your design workflow?
It doesn't fit, it is. like I can't, and people within the studio get a little bit frustrated with me, especially when we jump onto Microsoft Teams and I jump on, I'm like, I'm not using this platform, and set it up as a Zoom, send me the link. If I can't draw, I can't collaborate. Like I have to physically be drawing. Like I'm always like, even when I'm moving the press, I have to physically be drawing in order for me to understand things. I'm not a words guy. And so often my words, and even you can tell from that presentation, are confusing. But if I could draw, it's a lot more clear. So one of the things that I thought was amazing, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today, was that I was never really good. I could draw going back in history, but I was never really, that wasn't my powerhouse of like being able to sketch and draw quickly in front of people. I was more of a model maker, a writer, in thinking about things, and I could draw, but it would take me time. And when the iPad came out, and I used to use those old chunky wood stylus for the iPads because he refused to make a pencil for the iPad for the longest time. When the iPad came out, I started then to be able to draw and then go back to that drawing and actually send it to people really quickly. And so I started with just marking up my construction drawings for Rubenstein Tower. And it was kind of easy to mark up that way. I could be sitting on a plane. I'm not writing notes. I don't need my paper out there. I'm on a plane back to New York, and I'm just going wild with it. And the more that I started to like not mark things up, for certain moments of the day, I started drawing a lot more. And I think that enabled me, that new technological leap that you can draw on glass at any scale, really improved my drawing in a huge way that probably would have never happened if it was still relying on being at my desk, rolling out a piece of trace and marking it up for somebody and then send it back to them. I would be doing what most people are doing. They're in what's it called, blue beam, and everything's now typed with arrow pointers, right? And it's not that people drawing over top of the drawing saying, no, it should be like this. They're telling you what it should be like, but they're not showing you. And I think that's that ability to draw a lot more has made me better at thinking, but also better at being able to communicate. And I would encourage everybody, at first you start to draw on glass and it's like, whoa, you want that kind of tactileness. In the end, I think though, after you kind of muscle through it for a while, you can move so much quicker, so much more precise and slicker, that it actually I thought it made my drawing capabilities better. But it's every part of my day.
It's basically part of your process and part of your language.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because then COVID hit and everyone was like, how are you doing that? And for a while there was a blip there. People were like trying to get me to teach them how to do it. And then, now everyone's back in the office and it's sort of floated away a little bit more. And I'm just so frustrated. The AIA dumps so much money into BIM. And like, we have this, like, our art is what makes things come together, and thinking through, like, they're dumping no money into this. It's amazing. To me, kind of surreal.
Thank you. And last question, and then we wrap up because we are a bit over time. So, do you think the concept of technology is still sufficient to describe the tools and evolution we are experiencing today?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think, so I think they're trying to get at the bigger question of what is technology. I like I said, technology doesn't always mean a new thing. Like, people often like, oh, that's technology. It's like future. There's a lot of repurposing of older means and methods and tools that are very useful today if they're just tweaked a little bit, that we shouldn't forget about. I teach a course at GSAP called Emerging Optimism, but it used to be called, just so it was about the industrial landscape. And one of the things that people don't understand is that the efficiency of the oil industry of refining crude is 99.6. They don't waste a drop. Everything gets turned into something. And so there's lessons to be learned from those industrial industries that the emergent technologies can start to learn from, because they're not efficient yet, right? They're in their premature state, right? And so, but by ignoring how that was achieved, how basically the oil industry stole from the whiskey industry how to refine crude. I mean, it was a moonshiner in Pennsylvania that invented, basically kerosene by boiling down crude in his pot still and said, guess what? This kerosene, total accident, burns at the same rate as well blubber. Very safe, very steady, same amount of light. And at the time, the whaling industry, this is like 1878, 80, the whale industry was, dangerous. We whaled out the oceans and people were being lost. It was the whale industry had like scarred most of North America's coast, because they were just, pulling in kind of, slaughtering these whales to get at their blubber. And so this was, a renewable at that time. They thought, they were like, it's like a water well, renewable resource that is not as dangerous and not as harmful to the environment. Well, 100 years later, we know that's wrong, but it was the same pursuit at that time to make things healthier and keep people safer.
That's a good perspective. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, we have to wrap up. Thank you once again for being here and sharing your work, your vision, and clearly your reflections on the evolving role of technology in architectural are not only insightful, but also very important in where the profession is heading. So thank you so much for sharing today.
No, thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, so much for this amazing presentation, and also to Daniela for leading such a thoughtful conversation. So now let's move forward with our second guest of the day, Michel Rojkind. So as I mentioned earlier, Michel is the founder of Rojkind Arquitectos and is widely known for his innovative, context-driven design approach. He's taught at Harvard, UPenn, SCI, ARC, and IIT, served also as a juror in several major international competitions, and was recently named as a honorary fellow of the AIA. It's truly a pleasure to have him here with us. So, Michel, welcome.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Amanda. I mean, this feels like family, guys. This doesn't feel like a presentation randomly. This feels like super family. Sean, congratulations on your project. I was there in Venice. I definitely had an espresso, so it was great to be there, and it was really amazing to have that coffee. Let me just figure out how to share with my sound on. And that's it. So I press the share button here, and let's see if this works, and you can see my presentation. You can see my screen. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. So anyway, thanks for having me. Really, Amanda. Thank you, Joey, Anna. And again, when I say family, is because I think that the best things that have happened in architecture is the people that you meet along the way, and amazing human beings. And actually, my conversation and my talk today is a little bit more of a reflection that you'll see a reflection of things that happen in the office and that concern us a little bit. So if we're ready to start, I can start, and then I'll tell you a little bit about everything that's going on. So you can see the slides, right?
Yes.
Thank you. And it was also a good place where Sean left off, because I also carry my tracing pen everywhere. I'm a sketch guy as well. I again, if I get a meeting that I cannot write on the screen, it drives me crazy. But going back to the office and rethinking, when I was invited to talk about tech shaping architecture, one of the first things that really came to mind, and it was that technology doesn't just shape form; it reshapes our perception. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of things happening out there that I think is important for us to understand as humans, and better yet, to understand what is happening to culture. I don't remember exactly the name of the person who coined this term, the casinofied culture, and it started to scare me because they were talking about how this amazing thing that has moved society in so many ways, our culture, with arts, with crafts, with all the beauty, now just became this casinofied version of it. And talking about that, architecture as a tool for transformation. So bear with me and I'll explain a little bit more. Let me move my cursor a little bit here. So the idea that that culture has become a casino implies a superficial commodification or gamification of culture expression, where depth and authenticity are exchanged for spectacle, profit, and instant gratification. Culture must reconnect to its roots, prioritizing meaning over entertainment, regeneration over extraction, and community over individualism. Guy Debord was talking about this back in the days, and he was talking about, instead of the geographers only, what if the geographers were adding soul to the mix of how we would find cities? So coming back to connecting to earth, to mind, to the different things that are meaningful to us. And Nietzsche always also talked about the nihilism, and in a world where culture is commodified and meaning dissolves into spectacle, nihilism is not a distant threat. It becomes the backdrop. Culture turned into casino. What does that mean? Where the symbolic becomes spectacle, where the collective becomes entertainment, the profound becomes a gamble for instant attention. It is not an isolated modern phenomenon. It is the consequence of what Nietzsche was already talking about. He had diagnosed this idea of the collapse of the supreme values, something that we're actually seeing today as well. When we stop believing in transcendent ends, in shared purposes, in truths that anchor us, everything becomes a game, but not a sacred game like the ancestral rituals, but a hollow one, where value lies in not what is created, but how much impact it generates. And nihilism, in Nietzsche's words, appears when the why disappears. This is what's happening today, the collapse of systems, the collapse of, we don't believe in all these big powers anymore because there is not the right answer. And in this place, the vertigo of the immediate remains. Today, the absence of meaning wears the mask of popular culture, of algorithms, of trending topics. But the void is the same. What once was Greek tragedy, collective song, or mythology is now resolved through likes, symbolic wagers, and fleeting gratification. We are not living through something new. We are repeating on a different stage with new light, the same fall. And perhaps the first act of resistance is to recognize it and to create from somewhere else. We are living in this world of constant flow of information that most of the time, everything happens so quick, so fast, that there is no time to reflect. We talk about the planet and the fragility of the planet. And the question here is really the challenge of the prevailing narrative about the fragility of the planet. Who is really fragile, the Earth or us? Because when we had the pandemic, and we thought we couldn't stop because of the speed of everything and how society pressured us to go fast and quick. But the pandemic made us be in one place and everything could stop for a moment, and nature came out. We started showing all these images, surprisingly, about nature repopulating areas and animals coming back. And we understood that it was okay to slow down, that we didn't have to go at the same speed that everybody was going. And even though we're looking for different planets and trying to move to different places, to me, I want to show this graphic because it was very sad that during the pandemic, as a society, we could predict the financial crisis of the pandemic. But we still don't know today what is happening to mental health. The resilience of a society is determined not by the speed of its financial recovery, but by the depth of its commitment to healing the fractured souls of its people. It would be beautiful that as a society, if we were more interested in hearing our people, understanding our mindset, instead of worrying about the financial aspect, we would have much better societies. So again, this is a little bit of a wake-up call that how can we contribute to the world where human presence adds value to the environment instead of detracting from it? How do we design spaces that foster harmonious coexistence with our planet recognizing its resiliency and our role for caring for it. The word care, we're forgetting about all these words that are incredibly meaningful. And of course, to have that outer work as human beings, we have to do the inner work as a person to understand that everything is connected, and we want to have this better commitment for the community. So it's important to take our blindfolds off. This is images from Mexico that I like showing because all these incredible disparities of all these things that we've done as architects, urban planners, city planners. And first of all, we need to recognize the mistakes that we've done, because if we don't recognize as humans that we've messed up in so many ways, we cannot come back to really understand how to make things better. So now I'll start talking about a little bit of what we do in our office. And the most important in this speed of information is, what do we pay attention to today? What is grabbing our attention? Once we have that attention, how do we select that information and how do we adapt it to a process? I come from Mexico City, a very chaotic, well, from Mexico, but Mexico City, a very chaotic city with a lot of things happening. And I'm going to show Cineteca, where I talk about some spaces archive memory and others become memory. Cineteca is not just a restoration project, it's a cultural interface preserving and projecting memory. I mean, I always joke a little bit with Joey from Morfolio, because I don't think I use trace in the most professional way, but I use it in the way I understand how to express myself. So most of the time I'm doing sketches, redlining, I'm talking about all the things that need to happen in projects to get things done. So designing with purpose and the role of architecture in fostering resilient communities. I talk also a lot about when we have a project, we review the strategy, we question the question that the client is asking, and then we produce the best solution. In this case, it was, what was the identity of the Cineteca Nacional, our National Film Institute, where we archive all these amazing films from Latin America. And the project basically was making people understand that the recognizing the whole space. So how, when we came to refurbish it, how can we recognize the whole campus? And of course, we do a lot of digital design to local fabrication. For instance, the diagrid for the structure that we work with Studio NYL, partnering with local structural engineers in Mexico, was very important for us, because then we could figure out the patterns that we wanted to do behind. So this image that you're seeing now, this is the Film Institute. So this covered space, in order to have even light at the base, that everybody could have the same light in the plaza, the openings of the perforations of the panels that align with the structure are opening more at the center. So like the diaphragm of a camera that opens up and closes, the intention of this plaza was having this even light experience on the center place. Of course, we refurbished the inside. This is an image from the old Cineteca when we got there. So we converted this car parking garage to this, a place where people can gather and get together, and a place where life happens, as I try to say with our projects. And also, these are the panels that we were working with. So I was also sketching on the idea of the perforations, and where we need to have more open perforations as well. A project that has been recognized by the Mexican people, because they like going. This is the National Institute, as I mentioned, for film, but they do all these really important film shows around the world. It now has been recognized as one of the most important film theaters around the world. But the most important idea is that it felt like a campus. For instance, the outdoor cinema was not part of the program, but when we were there, we were thinking of the importance of creating this space that feels more like a public space, where everything can happen, where all these images that you're seeing here are photographs that are taken on a day-to-day basis of just people gathering without even going to see a film. And I always talk that architecture is a political act. Even if we're conscious or not, design constantly shapes our environment, and every choice carries a political implication. So I think that it's very important for us to think what we're doing as designers, understanding how to bring back culture as a very powerful tool to remain in our humanity. And for instance, even though we were designing the Cineteca, we designed a canvas for people to gather there. So for other cultural experience. So you have musical performance, you have theater happening, you have book fairs, you have many things that besides only talking about one program, we ended up solving for other issues. I also talk about from tradition to innovation, from digital design to local fabrication. And because again, the tools, the design, the technology that we have today, can we make that different? And even though this is a department store that might not be as glamorous as a cultural space, we knew we could do something that would help a little bit the community. So most of these department store were boxed storages that were close to the environment. So we started questioning the client, what happens if you open it up? That people from the inside look outside, and even better yet, that the outside start looking inside. So we started doing all these diagrams about how to perforate. Again, even though we have all the tools and technology to work in various different ways and headsets and different things, we love our craft. We love coming back to physical models, to doing all these things that you can touch and feel before even going to a project that has all these technological implications. So this is a little video that we created for the client back in the days, where we try to explain to him this kind of effervescence of the facade taking shape in a beautiful way to create kind of these exterior spaces that would have the perforations that would connect to the inside of the space. And it's interesting because it sits on Insurgentes and Felix Cuevas, which is these two main arteries in Mexico that are very, very high traffic areas. And that even from day one that we were built, or it was under construction, people were stopping because they didn't understand what was going on. Here's some cross sections where you can see the depth. It's not so deep. It's almost 2.5 meters, 2.6 meters. There's enough space to get some staircases inside. And coming back to the idea of technology, and in Mexico, that there's a beauty in the ingeniousness of Mexicans, but it's an ingenious that is done by necessity. I wish we would win more awards of how you would see all these beautiful things happening around of ingeniousness. But for instance, when one of the companies won the commission to or the contract to do the steel, we went to the factory and we were expecting a CNC cutter, a technology, and he pointed back to the guy that was there cutting every hexagon by hand. And what I mean cutting every hexagon by hand, he was precise as any machine could be. And he was cutting everything with his team, welding it, scraping it, getting everything ready to have everything actually go to the site and be assembled on site. So these are the images of how it was being built, the main structure, and the final result. So this glass box with these open areas that you can see to the inside or to the outside of the space, and then connect back to the city, and the city connecting back to the space. Tech can enhance our capacity to imagine, but only if we remain the authors of its purpose. It's very important to understand this. The purpose, the human aspect, how are we driving our technology to not forget who we are and what we're actually aiming for? What is our purpose as not only architects, designers, but as human beings? And this is a very beautiful building and very dear to me because this is my first building in the US. This is a collaboration between Marlon Blackwell, Christian Callahan, and Haruka, who we designed this project in a place where the community is a bikeable community. If you go to Bentonville, all Arkansas, everybody uses bicycles. They love their idea of bike share, of going all, not only in the city, but outside in these beautiful landscaped areas. So when we were talking about the bikeable possibility of the city, we were also thinking about, what if we did a bikeable building? What if we did something that eventually would take in already this beautiful sensation of people and the relationship to bicycles, And in this office building, again, instead of having an enclosed building that I cannot see the people that are inside of the building, I'm actually interacting with the people. There's more connection. There's more an interconnected community that then creates this idea of a building. Here are some diagrams where you can see actually the main street, 3rd Street connecting to the park behind. That's where you start the trail on the back of the building, and then you start ramping up the building. So it was important to also convince a client that wants to do the maximum amount of square meters of office space to understand that he can reduce the amount of sellable space because he has a more generous building that he can even rent or sell more for the quality of the spaces. So he was perfectly okay with the understanding of reducing the amount of footage on a building. And the beauty is that at every floor, you have this connection to the street. It's like the street climbing up the building. It's coming up towards the building. Every floor has a street front, which is also beautiful, even though if you're on the 6th floor. But the idea of not only the people that work in the building, but you see people passing by with strollers, people passing by with in roller skates. Here you're seeing some images of, we invited Stefan Sagmeister, a dear friend of mine, graphic designer, to do a piece. So you see some critters that are carrying these little jewels, and when they get to the top, the spelling of the jewels present this beautiful text that says "Now is better," which is something that Stefan Sagmeister has been working on for a while. Some of the interiors here, again, you see the building, and we're excited with the result. In Bentonville, there's not so many big buildings, so this is one of our the bigger buildings right now, and it's been very nicely embraced by the community in general. A lot of bicycle companies moved in as tenants, and the idea also of talking about generosity is not only how can we as architects design something with clients that is generous to the community, but also the people renting out the spaces, that they also have terraces. How can they be generous when people are climbing up the building and passing in front of their facade or in front of their terraces? And how can they make the experience better? So it's not only about what we do, but how we bring people to also work with us and give them the opportunity to host, entertain, or whatever they want to do with their companies to all these people that are coming up the building and moving around the building. And I'm going to jump to this other one where this is kind of me on the go everywhere. I'm sketching. I travel a lot, which sometimes is difficult, and not being in the office all the time. But I get the information, I sketch something back. So there's this constant communication that has given me the ability to be teaching at a university as a part-time professor, or going around or meeting some friends for the opening at the Venice Biennale and having Canal Espresso on Sean and Diller Scofidio installation. So I think it's very important how we're organizing ourselves with what we're doing. And this is a project where I talk about regeneration. I don't know, I still get the chills when I hear sustainability, because I think sustainability is not enough anymore. There's nothing to sustain. I think it just became a slogan or a logo that companies are using. And when we need to change the narrative, and we need to start thinking about regenerative solutions, we need to start talking about our interrelationship to other human beings, and of course with the planet and animals. But I think it's more about reciprocity, about understanding that we need to have a reciprocity mindset. So this is a project that we designed for a hotel, the Banyan Tree in Valle de Guadalupe. Here you're seeing some images of the villas. The villas are hidden into the mountains. Of course, they have these beautiful courtyards, but the idea of the spaces are the integration with the land. As Sean also was talking a little bit, we were trying to do, or we tried to do in this case, that you have, of course, existing pools, but what happens that if you have the pools, but on top of the pools, you have the treatment facilities that people can look at how the water is being treated. No, so you see all these processes that make architecture more connected to not only the way we experience the architecture itself, but what is happening to all these other components and waste management and energy that happens throughout the building. And this is the winery that we designed for this hotel. It's called Pictograma. And the idea of this circular winery that is run by this new winemaker who is amazing, Lucas da Costa, the amazing kid doing incredible things with his wine. More about, I remember it was funny because we were talking about, he wanted to create a sort of a Breaking Bad experience, but of wine. So we created this circular element made of pigmented concrete with the same color of the land of the site, and brick work as well. So you have this beautiful formations of these elements that feel a little bit more like it's coming out of the ground, like a desert flower that connects more to nature and to everything around it. And again, the experiences of how we connect to the land, which to us are super important. The way we're connecting, the way we're understanding that each project has a different solution, that each project is a different result because it's in a different place, because it's for a different client, and because it needs to have its own identity of what we're doing. So again, this is just a little bit of showing what happens when you walk to the inner area of the winery and you see the production and all the different doors moving around. Another beautiful video done by a dear friend, Edmund Summers. And of course, the wine valley taking shape in the back. And I'm going to jump also to a little, even though we don't, as Sean also was mentioning, we don't care too much about the size of the project, if it's big or if it's small. This is a house that we're designing right now for a client in a collaboration with my dear friend Derek Delecamp in Los Cabos. And the idea of this house, that center space, that stone that you see at the center of this animation, that's where we sat down with the client to have a meditation. And we started just feeling the place because we were on the top of this mountain. And we were there, it was like, what do we feel the land wants? What do we feel that also you as a client want to put into this land that is beautiful, that has this amazing view of Los Cabos in Mexico? And what do we want to express, and how do we want to be gentle with the land and have this relationship of what we're doing, has this dialogue of also the colored concrete, but also how it's purposed on the site. So the project has these vertical elements that touch the land, but then the other spaces are floating. So the natural landscape goes underneath the house, and to let just the landscape pass through, the natural wind flow freely, or any animals that are around the sites that are in their natural habitat can just pass freely through the site. This is a house that will be finished by the end of the year. And I'm going to close with this project that is very dear to me, which is a house that I designed for the Philharmonica of Boca del Rio in Veracruz. And I also want to leave you with all of these things that to me are important things to think about with time. No, so tech is not neutral. No, it encodes values, it encodes priorities, but it also encodes omissions. So the more we get into tech, the more we have an opinion, the more we try to humanize many of the aspects that are needed, then tech becomes an ally in the terms of that we can work with technology, but it's driven by purpose. And this project in particular, I speak a lot also about that it's not what we do, but how we do it on our day-to-day. So yes, we can design these beautiful buildings, but if I don't have a beautiful relationship to the other person next to me, or if I'm don't have this reciprocity relationship to nature, what is it that I'm doing wrong? So rethink, coming back to doing things with purpose. I show this image because this is where my grandparents came from. They are from Russia, immigrants, Poland and Hungarian, and they ended up trying to arrive in New York, but then they couldn't arrive in New York, so they ended up in Veracruz. So my grandparents entered through Veracruz. And so this project connects music, which was one of my careers before being an architect, architecture, and then this amazing place where my grandparents entered. So when we got the commission, it was really touching to me to design something. And again, as in many projects in Rojkind Arquitectos, we wanted to do something that would give back to the community. So every time we were presenting the project, it was always including the wave breaker that was very deteriorated. It was including all of these plazas to make other things happen in the same way that we were doing Cineteca Nacional, or most of the projects that we do that we want to give back to communities, even though we do a little bit or as much as we can. So here you're seeing some of these physical models that I tell you that we're always obsessed about having in the office, along with all the technology that we can use. How we started to construct that on site, some of the sections where you can see this enclosed area. And it's an enclosed theater because you have all these harsh north winds hitting on the side with sand. So it needs to be covered and protected, but you have these terraces and these little other spaces where you can peek out. We wanted to create this intentional, super heavy concrete element that's cantilevering at the entrance and shrinks and compresses the entrance to 2.2 meters. And once you go through this area, it opens up and you start seeing the whole Philharmonica on the inside. I'm going to put a video now that is very dear to me because it talks about this whole experience about connecting with the other. So a couple of months before the opening, the mayor who had given us the contract, because it was a government project, he called us to the main area to talk about something. And everybody thought he was gonna say something bad, that we were maybe running out of time, that it wasn't the quality that he was expecting. And the surprise was very different. And I hope you guys can hear the sound. And if not, don't worry, I'll explain it to you and we'll share this video because it's very touching. So all the workers were called to the center place. So everybody was dropping their things, leaving their stuff, curious to why they were going to be meeting on the main hall because nobody had talked to them about anything. And suddenly, one by one, every musician from the orchestra was wearing hard hats and vests and coming out to play the first concert for all the workers. And they wanted to share the importance of they're human and their work is being a musician to play, and they're honoring the work of the workers. And they wanted to play the first concert so they would see who they were working for. And again, this goes back to recognizing the person in front of me and coming back to our humanity, not letting the speed of things drive us in this craziness of world that we're living without taking a step back and breathing in. So at the end of the day, I'm not surprised that it got all these amazing publications and recognitions, because not from the ego of the architect, but because it was a beautiful project with beautiful energy from day one to the day it finished. The project, of course, has all these amazing elements where all these other things can happen. On the inside, you have spaces for not only the orchestra of Boca del Rio, but you have these other places for other trios to play. There's a closed stage for DJs or electronic music. There's recording studios. And it's a very raw theater, and I love that when I've had some friends come and share the experience, musician friends, asking them like how was the experience, and they love the rawness of the space, all the concrete and the wood to create a beautiful environment. Another beautiful thing that the project has from day one is that everything that happens on the inside is projected for free on the outside. So the idea that anybody walking by can just sit on the main plazas and witness either the Boca del Rio orchestra play, or they're witnessing any artist that comes along, or a rock concert, or whoever's playing inside, as a gesture of generosity also to the people that maybe cannot buy a ticket or don't want to buy a ticket. And again, this project becomes this new development area where you're probably going to start seeing all the population of new buildings with all these little coffee shops and restaurants at the base, because of course you have this beautiful beachfront in the front of the space. And again, some footage that we took there on site. This is kind of the everyday going on life that happens in Boca del Rio, Veracruz. The fishermen came back because, of course, when I was telling you that the wave breaker was abandoned, now we put this pavement, now it has lighting, so the fishermen came back, and it now became this project that really is changing the way things are happening there. So I'm just going to close with some statements and then we can go to Q&A. But I talk about architecture is not just about buildings. It's about the hands that build them, the people who inhabit them, and the lives they touch and what they can give back to the community. Our role as architects is to build environments that honor this interconnection, fostering inclusive, dynamic, and purposeful communities. Let's not forget our everyday guys. Let's not forget who we're working with on our day-to-day. And even though technology accelerates faster than reflection, architecture risks becoming simulation instead of substance. Let's not forget that it doesn't matter how fast we're going, we need time to reflect. Virtues that unite and connect communities and us as humans: empathy, trust, integrity, commitment, loyalty. And these virtues are not instant. They require time to develop. What hurts the most isn't that we've stopped or we've lost the future. It's that little by little, we've stopped imagining. They told us it was better to be practical, efficient, productive, that there was no time for unanswered questions. But something within us resists, because to imagine is not to escape. It's to look at the world with depth once again. It's to say what we see is not the only option. And if we're still capable of imagining, then we're still capable of rebuilding. Not to return to what was, but to invent something else, something that makes us feel alive, connected, and present. And maybe that's where it all begins. Imagining is not a spectacle. It is a force that inscribes desire into matter. Communities now. Let's not wait for another pandemic to slow us down, to reflect on all these things. And let's come back to creating a culture that is truly meaningful, truly inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think that some of us might need a minute or two to process this
Reflect.
presentation. Yes, yes. But thank you for this energizing and thought-provoking presentation. I think from time to time it's very important to have a reality check, right?
And I think more than ever, Daniela, but anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, I have so many questions in my mind. Amazing projects. I will start with a very broader question, because your work often challenges conventional architectural expectations, not only visually, but also in how buildings engage with the public, with the people, right? So my question is, how do you see technology as a driver of that disruption, especially in the way that architecture responds to urban and social contexts?
Yeah, I think that first of all, it's important again to challenge ourselves and to challenge our clients and to challenge our communities in terms of what we can do, and not only be conformed to be the good architect that follows the brief exactly and you're going to get your star in your forehead because you behaved very well. Because if we don't start challenging things, and what I was trying to say also in the talk, recognizing our mistakes. What have we gone wrong? What have we done wrong? How do we permit places to not have sidewalks? How do we permit places to not connect back to the city that they're in? How do we come back to understanding technology? We were talking about, I mean, when you were talking to Sean about the future of technology, I imagine that if we're wearing now all these gadgets for health, and I'm wearing my Aura ring, and I have my phone, and I have my Apple Watch, and they monitor my heart, and they monitor my breathing, and they monitor many things. When are we going to start having buildings that can monitor even the soil that they're sitting in, to understand that even though there's a building built on top of a piece of land, the land is still alive, and there's still life happening beneath it. And we need to start creating this interrelationship where what if we create foundations that nourish the land, no, and can give back to the soil to start with? And then how can the building give something back to the street where it's at? And then how it can not only be, don't get me wrong, I care about net zero and I care about self-sufficient, but I hate repeating the self-sufficient. It's like, let's stop talking about self and let's talk about what we do for others. So not only what a building can do for itself and of course not spend energy, but when are we giving back to the other buildings around? Maybe in the way that we can mimic trees that from the underground, their roots kind of interconnect, and when a tree is having some parasites or whatever, the other trees can nourish through their roots and the mycelium systems, ways of making other trees better. Could that start happening in our cities? Imagine the beauty of the responsibility and the interconnectedness of all these technologies applied in those beautiful ways. And Sean mentioned a lot of beautiful examples, no? But I think it's again, it's gonna be on us to question the things that we did wrong and how to come back to the right questions, not the right answers, to start asking again and to start reflecting and taking the time to ask those questions.
Very interesting. Now, thinking about the technology, and for me, it was really interesting when you presented the construction of one of your projects, and when you arrived on the site, you were expecting a CNC machine, and there was really a team cutting by hand every single piece of it, like and precisely as you were saying, as precise as a machine. Now, technology is often seen as a tool, but in your work it seems to function as part of the concept. It's almost like I have this feeling that when you are thinking about a project, you are already thinking how the technology can help or can support. Now, how do you think technology can inspire new architectural narratives in the future?
I think that, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned this project, because also the beauty of this, Daniel, is that not only we send a file and somebody cuts the file, we have an idea from digital design to the local fabrication, but most of the time, even before construction, we go to some workers to understand if what we want them to produce is done in the right way. So I mean, these are places like Mexico and in other countries around the world. But because of course in Switzerland the pieces would have arrived by a factory, no, and everything would be even hung by this technological. And in Mexico we don't have that, so you have to kind of adapt, and it's beautiful because again, you come in contact to the workers and you come in contact to the name of the guy, and you have this bond of the guy who tells you, yeah, I mean, you're the architect, that this is the technology you're using, but no. The way we weld here is this way. Okay. So you take that information and you come back. So this, when I'm talking about the new era of reciprocity, this is what I mean. It's not like this is what we do and that's it, and I impose something. We learn in this process, which is beautiful. And one piece that really was also very inspiring, that was right now at the Venice Biennale, was Bjarke's piece, no, the piece about ancient futures, where you have the wood carvers from Bhutan carving one side of the wood, and on the other side you had the robot carving the same pattern. And still today, the hand carved was much more beautiful than the robot, because you see the mistakes, and we're forgetting that mistakes are beautiful. That thing, I think that, again, the idea of reflecting, or what I wanted to say in the opportunity of having here this forum with you guys, is let's reflect on all the things that we're missing, because we're so excited with technology and the way it's going as fast as we can, to come back to the meaningful things, no? So we learn a lot from the workers, and not only, I mean, we come from Mexico, I come from Mexico, but right now we're working a couple of things in Albania, and I'm seeing the local workers in Albania, and I want to know about their crafts, and want to know about their things, to incorporate it in the process of our technology, and not to impose something, even though we go and work in a different country, no?
Yes, that makes total sense. looking back to the context, right? And understanding what makes sense and what we can give, but what we can learn as well. Okay, thinking more broadly about collaboration in this reciprocity, as projects become more complex sometimes, and how has your approach evolved when working with local teams and digital technology and clients through these processes? How is it to balance all of this?
I think first of all, you have to be open to the process. No, a lot of people talk about
Mhm.
collaborations, but they don't know how to collaborate. They think imposing their ideas to collaborate. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I always joke about this because I used to be a musician. I was a drummer in a band. But when you're a musician, you play with people, and the beauty of playing is that you want to interact. And I remember when I quit music professionally and started doing architecture, architecture was very hard to collaborate. Almost back in those days, no architect wanted to collaborate with one another. Right now, it's very common. The new generations are like all these interdisciplinary offices that do various different things, which is beautiful to me because it is more about this collaboration. But I think that if you're not open to new experiences, if you're not open to new challenges and to learning, first of all, to change your mind, and that's what I was also showing a slide in my presentation, talking about the inner work. When we're so fixed mindset people, we do not change and we're not open to understanding processes or or ideas of the other person working with us. I mean, I have it tattoos in my tattooed in my arms, open and receptive, because it's a beautiful mentality of a growth mindset where you want to. I want to learn from the workers of Albania, and I want to learn from the people that crafted our building in Arkansas, in the U.S., and I want to learn from Marlon Blackwell, and I want to learn from. I mean, my collaboration process in the office has been about these collaborations, and I go back to the analogies of musicians that, of course, they have their band, but you see somebody working with so many other musicians and having fun because it's about coming back to what drives us with purpose to create. And again, this not losing that we're just doing projects to do projects. No, why are you working on something? Why do you want to work with somebody? And again, coming back, I wasn't joking when I said that this talk to me as family because I've known you guys for so long that years pass and we still have something to say, and we're continuing the conversation of what is driving today technology. What does technology mean for architecture? Which I think is an open question. It's not something that we're going to close something here for this event.
Exactly. It's an ongoing conversation, let's say. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we can move on to the audience questions because I can read a couple of very interesting questions here. The first one I'm going to read is, thank you for your presentation. Your approach is very reflective and thought-provoking. I also appreciate that you are so ethical in architectural, considering all the perspectives and actors. I am particularly curious for one of your future projects, the metallurgical combine in Elbasan, Albania. In your presentation, you mentioned the importance of regeneration through technology and architecture in such a context. The metallurgical combine a big scale context that it's so polluted with waste. How can technology help to regenerate it, and how much time can it take? Greetings from Tirana.
Greetings for all the people that are connecting from Tirana, dear friends. Well, we're doing this beautiful master plan. First of all, we're doing a master plan where we're many minds working together. So it's important, again, to understand that it's not something that we're doing on our own. There's many amazing actors involved: Chris Perch, Cel Gascano, Christian Querez, Son Architects. Architects that are in Albania that are amazing and talented architects. A lot of different agents. We have biologists. We have so there's many people involved. The whole site is not equally polluted. So we have to figure out what parts of the soil, of course, are more polluted, less polluted. How do we use technology, but how do we use natural systems to filter the land and to really regenerate the soil? So there's a lot of work that's going to be put into it. Different parts of the project will take a little bit more time. Other parts of the project are quicker to start. I mean, there's companies already there that work on the food industry, that they're on a part that the soil is not contaminated or polluted. I think that the most important thing is, how do you change people's understanding that this can be converted into something beautiful? And I think that one of the best examples is the Diller Scofidio project that just won at the Biennale, that everybody was talking about. The canal, it stinks, it smells, blah, blah, blah. And then you were seeing people having their canal espressos, no? And people were like, are you really going to drink that? And I mean, I was joking also, saying like, I come from Mexico, guys. Here, I mean, I don't know what I've drunk before here in my country. So the least that I'm worried about is having espresso from the canal. But there's many ways of doing things that could be incredibly beautiful. I mentioned some of the offices. There's many more that will be involved. And we're actually bringing, again, we want to work with the most advanced technologies, but we also want to work with the most human and natural way of doing things as well. So there's not one direction. And we're excited to be part of that project, and we're incredibly honored and careful and responsible, as I was trying to mention, to figuring out how to have the right pieces working there. But we'll have a beautiful metallurgical master plan in the future for sure.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, one more question is, I have completed my first year of architecture recently, so just a curiosity, how did you get the idea, concept of bikeable building? What inspired or influenced you to build this building?
Well, again, it's the openness that is, imagine, sometimes as architects, you get a commission, and even though before you go to the site, you already have an idea in your head, because you think you know it all, and that's the wrong approach, at least for me. So if you're open, the day we landed in Arkansas, the client greeted us and put us on bicycles. He said, I want you to see how we live our city. So we went on a bike trip, and I was in my bike trip absorbing all this beauty of their community and understanding why they were making all these trails and why they were wanting to be so proud of creating all these interconnections of, I mean, they have amazing trails. I mean, in Mexico, we go mountain biking, and the mountain is the mountain. These guys create landscapes within the mountains that are amazing to bike. And then you come back to the city and they're still on their bikes, and they leave their bikes and they have lunch and breakfast or whatever. So absorbing that and being open to that experience, is like, we cannot do anything other than create a building that you can ride on your bike. And it was beautiful because we were doing it during the pandemic, that it kind of felt like a post-pandemic building where people, of course, you have the typical cores on the inside of the building and you can take the elevators, but most of the people decided to walk to their office. So you would see people coming in and out of their buildings to their office spaces, like in the pandemic, where you didn't want to be crammed in an elevator with more people. So again, I think that before imposing ideas, and I mean, you mentioned that you were in first semester of architecture, before imposing an ideas, have the capacity to listen, have the capacity to sit back and listen and understand and take in what's interesting and what's important about the site for you. I mean, the way you connect to the client, the way you connect to the community, the way you connect to the things that are meaningful, and again, with purpose. And come back to using these words that we sometimes forget in architecture because we're so obsessed about the production of technology and all. It's like, come back to really reflect on things, no? And again, I mean, just listen more and talk less.
Amazing. Okay, last question from the audience.
Okay.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation, always so full of energy and good vibes. True. Now for the question, how do you see the next step of technologically interconnected neighborhoods and buildings, reflecting on your statement about avoiding to put the self of building in the first place?
Well, imagine that we're more conscious about how things work. And again, imagine that we're more conscious about, right now, for instance, you're in my house. This is my bookshelf, and this is how I live. But imagine that if I'm in my house and I have enough technology, before I'm getting a phone call by my neighbor who doesn't have his Wi-Fi or something doesn't work in his house, I can immediately be aware because I have something interconnected with my phone or whatever that he needs some Wi-Fi. So even before him asking me, I can send him my link so he can connect to my Wi-Fi. Or if he's missing water, maybe everything is so interconnected that, oh, you don't have hot water today because you didn't pay your gas bill. Don't worry, I can send you hot water through my house to your house. I mean, this is thinking way in the future, but that would be a more interconnected way. I think that our problem again is that we're so separated from the other, from each person. And I mean, and again, I was showing the video of the workers giving a concert to the Philharmonica giving a concert to the workers, because as architects, we get all these clients talking about the future scenarios of, oh, we're going to build this beautiful community in 20 years. And the guy didn't say hi to the guy cleaning the street.
Yeah.
So I don't trust this guy because he's talking about the beauty of communities, but he's really not a good person. He doesn't care about the police guy. He doesn't care about the guy in the streets. He talks bad to the waiter in the restaurant. So all these little things that really make me mad, because it's like, how can we imagine a more beautiful scenario of how we want to live as humans if we don't recognize where we are? No? So, I mean, just that, no, um, just paying attention and being aware of how we can interconnect as humans, and that will naturally evolve to drive to this interconnectedness or reciprocity, that every technology is not just a transaction. Everything is not for advancement. It's a transaction where it can flow in a very beautiful way, where you don't have to ask me. And then imagine if I was talking about the houses interconnected, imagine then about cities and about parks and then about countries, in a very optimistic scenario that I hope at some point we start hearing more about, no?
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your work, your process, and your philosophy. It's been very inspiring to hear how you use technology, not just to build, but to question, to engage, and to transform. Thank you so much, and congratulations on your work.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rojkind, for everything. It was incredible presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And well, that brings us to the end of today's session. So a huge thank you for our incredible speakers, Sean and Michael, for their generosity in sharing their time, insights, and experiences. And to all of you in the audience for staying with us until the end. We truly hope today's conversation was enriching. Our mission to constantly bring valuable, thought-provoking content to our global community is something we care deeply about. And your feedback and engagement are what keep us going. To our speakers, again, thank you for being for helping us build a more informed and inspired community. And to Morfolio, a heartfelt thank you once again for your continued support, not just this month for the webinar series, but through all these years. It's always a joy to collaborate with you. And before we wrap up, just a quick reminder that the Architecture Hunter Awards 2025 are now in the main entry phase. So if you haven't joined yet, now's a great moment to guarantee your participation. We have an incredible jury, and we would love to have you part of this global celebration of architecture. And don't forget, our next webinar is coming up on May 30th, same time, same place. We'll be joined by Carlos Bagnon, Associate Professor at the University of Technology and Design and an expert in AI, and Cosimo Scotucci, Senior Project Leader at MVRDV. We hope to see you all there.